Greetings, truth seekers, paradigm busters, new world order, civil disobedience, freedom fighters, free thinkers, higher mammals, good people of all types. How's it going? My name is Michael Parker, and welcome to the 33rd episode of the Electric Pyramid. And I'm coming to you, as always, from my super secret underground lair deep below Hollywood, California. And I want to say hello. How are you? Tonight is Thursday, January the 29th for me, because I am on the West Coast. My good friend and confidant, Joe Kiernan, it's already Friday morning.
This is true.
For him. Greetings, Joe.
Greetings from Friday morning to you, good fella.
Hey, Joe, so we are going to talk for just a second. I'm trying to read. You guys, I'm still a little new at the chat game. I'm sorry. So I'm just getting Greetings, truth seekers, paradigm busters, new world orders, civil disobedience, freedom fighters, free thinkers, higher mammals, good people of all types. How's it going? My name is Michael Parker, and this is the 34th episode of the Electric Pyramid, transmitting, coming to you globally from an undisclosed location somewhere in Hollywood, California. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 9:03 here on the West Coast. Perhaps it's much later than that wherever you are. If it is late, I appreciate you staying up with us and tuning into our broadcast to see what myself and Mr. Joe Kiernan have going on. Joe, how are you?
Fantastic. Thoroughly enjoying Mercury retrograde.
So things
good,
are,
buddy. I'm really doing all right. Doing good.
How
are things out west?
They are fine here. Are you getting hit by the cold weather that I keep hearing about?
Not really. I mean, it's a little colder than the norm, but surely not that bad. It's just
that's good.
It's been overcast and a lot of rain lately. If that went away, I'd be just fine. Because as long as that sun's shining, it's fair weather.
Right. Yeah.
Have you been getting rain?
We have gotten a few drops here and there, which we will always take.
I know you needed it all year, and this is your rainy season.
Absolutely. February is our month here in California.
February's the month, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So right now we are still an inch under. And, but yeah, we're getting a little bit here and there. So I cannot complain. Everybody is happy to see the rain. Northern California, I think, actually is hurting even more so than we are right now. So we'll have to see what ends up happening on that. But we're getting a little bit of rain and the weather's fine. I mean, it's always pretty easy to live here.
No doubt about that.
With the exception of the rent and the mortgage.
And the occasional quake.
And the occasional quake.
But they're all right. As long as it's not a catastrophe, I mean, they happen.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. You mentioned Mercury retrograde, which we are in. Have you had any strange communication snafus or anything in the last week or two?
Just with humans. I've had terrible run-in with incredible, unique people that seem to try to disrupt me from my path, and I'm just taking it as little tests, I suppose, or I think that maybe that's just the way I'm telling myself in order to deal with it. But But I'm going to say, since you pointed it out to me, I had noticed it that day prior. Like, I wasn't kidding around. And things aren't normal, but they're not bad for me. It's just things are not normal, but I'm kind of experiencing different things, weird things, but I'm enjoying it. I'm trying to be very observant through it all.
Good. Well, I've got to say, so far this one has been pretty painless for me. And as I tried to explain 2 weeks ago, Mercury retrograde gets a bad rap. Everybody thinks that, oh my God, for 3 weeks, everything's going to go wrong. Everything's going to break down. My communications are going to be mixed up. But the good side of it is that it's a great time to finish things. It's a good time to organize. It's a good time to revisit things that needed to be finished or you needed to take a second look at. And it's a good time for completing things. So that
is wild, man. I told you I've been sitting down with my nose in books all day long, and that's really what all I've done since probably for like 14 hours straight today. And I've really just been going at it. I'm sitting here at a desk piled with notes and structures for writings. I'm trying to wrap up a few things that really need to be said, in my opinion. And it's interesting you say that, because I did get a kick in the pants to just say, wrap this crap up. So I'm deep in it, and I'm loving it. As crazy as it sounds.
Well, this is a good time to do that. I've got a little news for you in the audience tonight.
Lay it on me, bro.
So here's the deal. Check this out. I said it was a good time to revisit things, and this is something that just came down today, but it's been in the works for a while.
So this is through the Mercurial Messenger, perhaps?
Well, hey, you know what? The deal got done today. I am going to start another show on the internet, and this will actually be a show where people can see me. This will be a new show that will start on the 23rd. And don't worry, the Electric Pyramid will continue to go on as well. Hey, man, I'm trying to get as many lines out into that big ocean of information as I can. But this is something that I've been working on for a while. I will be starting a second show on the 23rd, and some of our listeners may be familiar with this network. It's called The Lip TV. Sean Stone, who is Oliver Stone's son, does a show called Buzzsaw, which is on there, and I will be starting a new show on there on the 23rd of this month. We just finally finished the discussions today, and it will be material.
Congratulations, Michael.
Thank you very much. It will be material much like what we talk about on here. So that will start on the 23rd. I'll let you guys know more about it as it happens. And Electric Pyramid does not go away. Electric Pyramid continues. The new show will begin, and I will be doing them both. So the more, the merrier. And awesome. It's been in the works for a long, long time. And just got the news today that it will happen, and I'm very excited about that. And it's on a network called The Lip TV, which is a interesting little network. It's a lot of edgy, fringe news like we do on this show, so that should be good. And another thing I wanted to mention that has been all over the news, at least in the UFO world in the last week or so, has been the story of these. Actually, it's not a brand new story. The story kind of began in November of last year. There's a UFO researcher. His name is Tom Carey. He made an announcement, I think like the first week or so of November, that he was in possession of 2 Kodachrome color slides that dated back to a period between 1939 and 1949. And this has been verified.
Better be if you're using the word Kodachrome.
Yes. And this has been verified by the Kodak Labs.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
They are vetting that this is, the real deal. This is a slide from those.
Authentic stock. Well, okay.
That is what they're saying. And fantastic. Now There's more to it. Now, here's what he's claiming that he has. He's claiming that in his possession are 2 slides that appear to depict extraterrestrials, Roswell aliens. And before we all get too excited about that, and I'm sure there are some out there who are already face-palming, saying, oh, God, here we go again. But I will say this. I'm not going to say this is a hoax. I am just going to wait and see how this pans out. I'm going to tell the story. It's kind of involved. One thing that does kind of send up a bit of a red flag to me is the fact that he made another announcement today. Well, actually, not him, but Jaime Maussan, who is a very famous Mexican journalist and UFO investigator. And listen, you know what? A lot of people don't feel great about Jaime. They think that he's a bit of a huckster. Listen, I've met the guy. I've seen him speak. I don't think he's a bad guy. I think that sometimes he's supported some stories that I probably would not have, but I'm not willing to say that he's not sincere. And so apparently he's jumped into the mix on this. And so here's what happened. This man, Tom Carey, claims that he came into the possession of these 2 slides via another person, a man named Adam Dew. Now, this person, Adam Dew, he claims that he got the slides from a buddy whose sister cleaned them out of a home in New Mexico of a deceased couple. Actually, I'm sorry, not New Mexico, in Arizona. She was getting this house up ready for an estate sale. And while she was cleaning up the home, she comes across this box, which has, I think, probably literally 100 or so slides in it. And instead of throwing them away, she actually keeps them. She takes them home. She sits on them for like 10 years.
That's creepy.
I don't know what inspires her to take them out and take a look at them one day, but she does. And what she discovers in this box of photos is that, and these are all, slides, is that these photos are really, there's a lot of famous people in them. There's actors, there's Errol Flynn, there's Bing Crosby, Clark Gable, President Dwight Eisenhower. The couple who had taken these pictures were obviously well connected. As it turns out,
right.
The couple, the woman was a fairly prominent lawyer. They lived in Midland, Texas. The husband was a fairly prominent oil geologist. As a matter of fact, I think he was president of the West Texas Geological Society for a while. And I can tell you from living in West Texas and working in the oil business, and I have spent a lot of time in Midland, Odessa. Listen, those 2 little towns, nothing to look at. Very unattractive little towns, but rife with intrigue. At one point, the Bushes were somewhat based in Midland. And there is huge oil infrastructure in Midland, Odessa. So the fact that this couple lived in Midland, Odessa does not surprise me.
Last week, did we happen to throw Roswell in the mix on the 33rd parallel? Is that another 33rd parallel town?
That sounds like it's going to be very close,
I think it is, if I'm not mistaken. I wasn't sure if we got into that last week or not.
No, but we're going to have to touch upon that again.
I wouldn't be shocked, and I think it is.
It sounds like it would be just about the right area. So listen, if it's not on the 33rd, it's very close.
We're going to make it the 33rd.
Yeah, might as well. So anyway, so this prominent female lawyer and her husband, obviously well-traveled. They had no kids. She was a pilot. There's rumors that she had connections with the intelligence agencies. These slides bear witness to the fact that they were very well-traveled because there's slides of Paris, many overseas countries, and then there's pictures of them at very lavish events like golf tournaments here in Los Angeles, surrounded by celebrities. Like I said, Eisenhower's in one of the pictures. obviously this couple was very well connected, and they didn't have children, so they had money, they were able to travel. Okay, so this woman who is undisclosed, cleaning the house, gets the box, takes the box home, doesn't do anything with it for 10 years. When she finally goes through it, she finds all of these slides, and it tells the story of this couple and all the traveling they did. Well, that in itself is interesting enough. And you can see the slides of some of these famous people that are on the internet. Where it gets weird is that there's two slides that appear to depict extraterrestrials. And these extraterrestrials are in a lab, very much hinting at a Roswell type situation. And the person who ended up now currently being in possession of the slides, who claims that he is in the sports broadcast business, he takes great pains to say, listen, I'm not saying this is anything. I work in sports broadcast. These slides were given to me. I found this. I have taken it and had it investigated and vetted by a historian at Kodak, who claims that indeed these slides are from the time period. They could not narrow it down to a single year, but sometime between like 39 and 49. So now what's going to happen is they made this press conference today, and actually Jaime Maussan made the press conference. Here's where it gets a little weird for me. As I mentioned before, Jaime Maussan is a famous Mexican journalist, big-time UFO investigator. He's been associated with a lot of big-name UFO cases for the last 15 years, some of which didn't really turn out to be anything. Listen, some people think he's a huckster. I'll just put it that way. I'm not going to say that because I think the guy is sincere in his passion for UFOs. And so I am willing to give the benefit of the doubt to a person who leaves behind a successful, legitimate broadcasting career, because he was on the 60 Minutes of Mexico originally, and that's how he built his name. And for the last 10 to 15 years, he's put most of his personal finances and his reputation into UFO research. Well, so anyway, they make this announcement today that they are now going to show the slides on May 5th. Why May 5th? I don't know. And they're going to do it in Mexico City. So they're going to do it on Cinco de Mayo in Mexico City. Now, that causes a great deal of consternation to many UFO researchers, because they're like, well, wait a minute. If you have the slides, why can we not see them now? And I tend to fall in that area. However, I understand that probably what they're trying to do is figure out how they can make money on it. And to be fair, the sports journalist or sports broadcaster who is in possession of the slides is in fact making a documentary right now, which he's calling Kodachrome. And if you go on the internet, you can find a link to, and actually, you know what? I'll put it, let me just copy it and I'll put it in the chat room right now. It's on YouTube. I'm going to put it in the chat room. Bear with me so people can see it if you are interested.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, I just posted it. So it's a 3-minute trailer, and I've got to say the production quality for this trailer is quite good. He explains how he came to be in possession of the slides and what he intends to do with it. So Jaime Maussan, how he got involved with the project, I do not know. But come May 5th, they are going to show these two slides to the world. Right now, you cannot see the slides, but you can see 3D mock-ups of the extraterrestrial that is purported to be in the slides. So I don't know what they're going to do on May 5th. I don't know why we have to wait 4 months to see them, especially since the initial first statement about their existence was made in November. But it is probably the biggest story in the UFO circles right now. What say you, Joe? What do you think?
I'm not too sure. I think it's going to be definitely scrutinized and go through a lot of studies. But there's, I would really like to know more about the people that originally had these slides. How did they go about getting them? In what setting did this take place?
Well, that's a great question. And part of this documentary right now, the couple in question is Bernard and Hilda Blair Ray. And one of the things that they're trying to do now is find out more about this couple, because apparently I don't believe they had children. And the documentary Kodachrome that they're trying to build, there is a website which you can find, and they are asking the public, do you know more about this couple? And to me, what's interesting about it is that I don't know if it's real or not, but sometimes when I look into this entire UFO realm, sometimes I'm just entertained by the complexity of the stories that emerge out of it. Listen, it may not even be true. I remember probably 7 or 8 years ago reading all the Serpo files for the first time. And it was this incredible story of this supposed secret personnel swap between the United States and these extraterrestrials from some planet called Serpo. The whole thing was a hoax, but it was pages upon pages of files, and it was fascinating. Whoever crafted it, it was very entertaining. And so when I come back to this, I'm not saying that this is a hoax, but it's certainly questionable. And I have to admit, from a entertainment standpoint, I'm fascinated. I want to know more about this. I've seen that a lot of my UFO buddies on Facebook are talking about it. A lot of people are knocking it, saying, oh my God, Jaime Maussan's involved and this, that, and the other thing. Listen, I've been through this for so long and seen so many stories come and go that I don't get personally invested in their outcome. I just take a look at the story, read into it. It's interesting. I'll follow it. Actually, I'll probably forget about it before they even come out with the actual slides. But it's interesting. And as these stories go, it's one of the better ones. So I wanted to bring it up because everywhere I seem to look, it is what UFO people are talking about at the moment. Well,
I would love to get a little more on it too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fact. I mean, it's time for new evidence. If this is one of the stronger cases, and historically it has been, and a lot of credible names have put great weight on their studies. So, if these things did exist there, I would really have imagined that material like photographs or slides, things like this would have come up by now.
Sure.
I mean, I know I've seen supposed video of alien autopsy or something there.
The Ray Santilli, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'll leave it at that. I saw that, but I was, hoping to see some more. It's a case with great phenomena that has changed so many times, and on both sides. They
certainly
from day one, which was always an amazing thing, and it continues to do so. It just confirms to me that it's just a constant battle of hide the truth game that goes on.
It is, and
I mean, I don't know to what extent, but clearly truth is being hidden on that whole Area 51 thing. It's just everything. I mean, it wasn't even technically recognized as a base until a year or two ago.
Agreed.
So, I mean, I'm not speculating on what they're hiding, but no doubt they are.
Yes, I'm with you. I had to give that caveat that, seriously, I don't want to appear cynical to our audience, but I have to say that in all of my years of following the UFO thing, I've seen so many stories come and go that I don't get worked up about it because I was reading comments today where some people are already mad about it. They just think it's a hoax from the get-go. I actually don't think it's a hoax. I don't know what it is. But it's entertaining to me. And regardless, this story itself is Hollywood film worthy. You know, a box of slides from the 40s is unearthed and they show, you know, Hollywood celebrities and President Dwight D. Eisenhower, and they apparently come from some mysterious power couple from Midland, Odessa, which, Joe, I'm telling you, brother, if you ever saw Midland, Odessa, Texas, you would think, my God, get me out of here. It is as flat as a table, ugly as sin. And listen, ladies and gentlemen, if you happen to be in Odessa or Midland, I'm not knocking it. I'm from near Abilene. Where I'm from looks much the same. So
Michael, if I'm not mistaken, and please help me, correct me, please, if I'm wrong, but I believe I recall an incident where Dwight Eisenhower went to Area 51 supposedly for a meet and greet with extraterrestrials.
Holloman Air Force Base, 1952.
Okay.
You are correct.
So I mean, another big coincidence to have that same person on similar slides in the same collection.
Well, Eisenhower,
I don't know where Bing Crosby fits in, but clearly somewhere.
Well, the pictures of the celebrities are just shown because, hey, they were in there, and
because they were obviously A-listers of some degree.
Yes, and these people were traveling in pretty fun circles.
Yeah, but in the know with the people with the know, that's for sure. Yeah.
They were making good parties. They were traveling in a nice social circle. That doesn't mean that, you know, these celebrities knew anything about this, but it just shows that the people, you know, they had the money to travel and they went to a lot of fun events. To me, just the fact they were from Midland kind of didn't surprise me because Midland, Odessa, like I say, it's this desolate place, which would really be nothing if it weren't for the oil business.
So what's the connection there, Michael?
To me,
how did these people could they really have been that affluent from that area to have the means to rub elbows with such people?
Well, so affluent. I'm
picturing a little. I'm picturing a tumbleweed blowing by.
Well, that's absolutely what Midland, Odessa looks like. Imagine a lot of oil wells, a lot of tumbleweeds, very flat. There are some very rich people there, very rich people there. You would not know it from your immediate surroundings. Now, I'm not saying that this couple is that rich. I'm just saying that because they didn't have kids and they both had good jobs, they were able to. She was a pilot, supposedly, and a prominent lawyer with possibly connections to intelligence agencies. He was obviously a field geologist of great repute. And listen, West Texas and New Mexico, at that point, if you were in the oil business, you were probably in just about the best industry you could be in that region. So they were both, they were making good salaries. And I'm not saying they were rich, but they were well-to-do enough that she could be a pilot, they could travel around, and they could go to events like these golf tournaments and such and travel to Europe and have a good time. So now how she winds up with slides of extraterrestrials, that remains to be seen.
Right, that is the question.
Totally the question.
More so like, what did you do with them? Did you know what they were when you got them? Even if they weren't the people taking the images, did you have to hide them? Did you show them to anyone? Like, say, look what we got. I have so many little questions like that. Did you just say, hey, I'll put them in this box and hopefully no one will ever ask for them?
Well, Joe, you're right. I mean, you would think. Let's get serious for a moment.
In any year, right? It don't matter what year it is.
Yeah, exactly.
You say, like, look at this photograph I have here,
Yeah, these are extraterrestrials. I'm just going to throw it over the box with our summer trip.
Look at Bing Crosby. And, Don't
like
mind
you're
those
not,
two guys there.
yeah, you're not gonna separate those out. I mean, listen, this
Curious.
does,
Yeah, exactly.
Joe. It has the hallmarks of a questionable story, but I bring it up because even if it's false, somebody should make a film about this. The guy's making a documentary. He narrates it, and the little 3-minute trailer that I saw was quite good. So, we'll see what happens come Cinco de Mayo.
Cool stuff. Great stuff.
So today, another thing, when I was reading on Facebook and people were going back and forth about this, and you mentioned evidence. Well, a friend of mine, Leslie Gunter, who some folks may know, a great UFO researcher and friend, she posted a quote that is supposedly from Isaac Asimov, the wonderful science fiction writer. Now, I cannot verify that he made this quote, but it's about evidence. And listen to this. This is Isaac Asimov. I believe in evidence. I believe in observation, measurement, and reasoning, confirmed by independent observers. I'll believe anything, no matter how wild and ridiculous, if there is evidence for it. The wilder and more ridiculous something is, however, the firmer and more solid the evidence will have to be.
Agreed.
Yes. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And my gut tells
sometimes a picture just doesn't do it anymore either. We're in this technology age where everything is questioned. I mean, because really anything can be duplicated or created.
Joe, I hear you, brother. I mean, listen, at this point in the game,
and I'm not judging it. I'm just saying it's the skepticism range these days. It's infinite. It's hard for people to believe these days on anything without. But really, it comes down to the credibility, right? So who's presenting it at times, especially on these topics.
I think so, and you're right. I mean,
but I hope they handle this one. I hope if they truly entrust what they have, I really do hope they take their time and go about it right. To be honest with you, before it gets ripped apart like a pack of dogs would do, and they slander it to death, where it never really gets the light of day like it should. So,
hey, listen, you and I are doing that right now in a very gentle and reasoned way. And you know what? It deserves it, because
if they truly have their heart and soul and belief that they have what they claim to have, I really hope they take their time and do it right. I really do.
I do too. Part of the problem here again comes back to, okay, why Cinco de Mayo in Mexico City?
Right.
It's like, come on, man. If you've got 2 slides of an extraterrestrial, we need to see those now.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm not in possession of them, and
that might be for some. That might have been in a contract negotiation for maybe some sort of television publication by Jaime. I mean,
Joe, it's certainly.
It could be. You know what?
Yes.
I'm not trying to discredit the guy. I like the guy.
Yeah.
I mean, people have given him slack about some, throughout the years on false claims or false videos and these things. But I mean, the guy has reported on like 20,000 claims,
That's right.
He can't investigate every one of them before he speaks on it.
And you know what?
New videos come out, I mean, he's just excited to report that news to get it out there as fast as anyone. And sometimes they turn out to be from false origins. And I think the guy does an excellent job. His contributions are immense. He's done fantastic for decades.
I've met the guy just briefly, but usually I feel like I'm pretty good with a sense of character for people. You know what? Honestly, I like the guy. So can I vet his character? No, but I liked him, and I did get a feeling of passion for the subject.
Yeah.
And that's to me, that speaks volumes. Listen, I remember when over the years, I have followed some dead ends, and I have gotten excited about things which later turned out to be, nothing. But that's how you learn. And if this were an easy game, if this were something where credible evidence was popping up at every turn, hey, maybe we would have this thing solved already, but we don't. And You just have to hope that people's hearts are in the right places, and one brick at a time, we will sort this thing out.
I think it will.
I do too. So anyway, that's that. I put the YouTube link in the chat room for people to check out. If you're curious about it, the documentary is just called Kodachrome, and if you just look up Roswell UFO slides on Google, I'm sure you're going to find, my God, there are dozens and dozens of stories about this right now. So it's out there, easy to find, and I just thought I'd bring that up because it's interesting. But hey, so now let's jump over to the 33rd parallel, because we got to pick up on what we were discussing last week. Because Joe, I know you're not a football guy. Did you watch any of the Super Bowl by chance?
I'm proud to admit I watched 0 seconds of it.
You did not even do your research on a possible satanic halftime.
I don't even believe I had a television turned on that day. No, I did not research anything, but I did hear about a good halftime show by Katy Perry. I heard with some sharks, with some dancing sharks.
Which I'll be honest, I still don't get the sharks. So, let me give you my take on it.
Big shark guy.
Hey, sharks! I got nothing against sharks. I don't want to get
dancing sharks.
Dancing sharks. Who doesn't love dancing sharks?
Right. The dancing bears worked great for the dead. So.
Hey, that's true. Yeah. Forgot about the dancing bears. So many people thought that, per the last couple of years, and we discussed it on the show, could it be that this latest Super Bowl would have some kind of Illuminati symbolism embedded into it? As many people thought the Madonna performance and Beyonce performance and Black Eyed Peas performances of a few years ago were. Well, I watched it, and I can tell you that there were a couple of things that stood out to me as interesting. For example, she enters the field on this large gold metallic cat, which I think was actually a tiger as opposed to a lion. It's this robotic beast, obviously feline, and there are many people that have said that refers to a passage in Revelations in which the prostitute rides the great beast. Well, so, okay, maybe. I don't know. So that was the first thing. It looked very strange. The beast had glowing eyes. She's on top of it. It definitely harkened back to some kind of a Egyptian kind of thing. But is that Illuminati symbolism, or are they just playing us? I don't know. The one thing that definitely stood out to me right off the bat, and here again, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know if we're being played or if this is real. The next thing you see are these kind of silver metallic, I guess they're chess pieces, but to me they looked more like stylistic extraterrestrials on a checkerboard ziggurat. And as we all know, the checkerboard symbolism figures heavily into Freemasonic symbolism.
Big time.
And so she's dancing around with these silver metallic people, because a lot of people also wondered, will she do something ET oriented? Because Katy Perry has mentioned numerous times that she's very much interested in the whole UFO ET hypothesis. She loves ancient aliens. She's also been very open about her interest in the Illuminati. So a lot of people were curious, is there going to be some kind of an ET theme? Well, the way they started the halftime show was the Phoenix, Arizona stadium, which does look a bit like a UFO. You see it kind of hovering in the air as a spaceship to begin the halftime show. So that was kind of an interesting touch. It looked, if you've ever seen District 9, it looked a bit like that. The stadium is hovering over the Phoenix skyline, and the next thing it cuts to is Katy Perry on the Great Beast coming to the center of the arena. Okay, so after she does that bit, Then she walks onto this platform. Some people have called it a ziggurat. Maybe it's just a stage. And it is checkerboard. And the people are certainly metallic. Perhaps they're extraterrestrials. Perhaps they're chess pieces. Perhaps this is symbolism that we are all in a game and we are merely pawns. I don't know. And then after that, I've got to be honest, I didn't really see too much that made me think Illuminati, because shortly after that, Lenny Kravitz comes out. And listen, I like Lenny Kravitz. He's a legitimate musician, rock and roller. Unfortunately, they give him like 1 minute max to play and sing, and then he's just kicked to the curb. And and then they're dancing around with the sharks, and she's in some form of childlike get up, and there's some beach symbolism, which I totally really didn't get. I actually thought that was tacky. Maybe other people saw symbolism in it. I did not. Then a rapper from the 90s, a very popular producer at one time, Missy Elliott comes on, and Missy Elliott like dominates the thing for like 2 minutes. And I've got to be honest, it didn't do a thing for me. So I can't even remember how. Oh, okay. And at the end, she changes clothes again, and she is picked up onto this. Basically, she flies around the arena. Katy Perry flies around the arena on this star. Now, is this Sirius? As in Sirius the star? What is this? Some people have made mention that this is representative of certain things. I don't know. In the story for me, it was not that impressive. I mean, it was fun to watch. She sounded great. She sang great. I think my kids enjoyed it, But as far as some form of deep Illuminati symbology, I still am of the same opinion that I have always been, which is that I don't know if this is some kind of intentional ritualistic thing that we're all supposed to witness, or is it smart-ass art direction? Playing us and putting these things out here so guys like you and I will be discussing it in shows like this.
Bit of both.
Bit of both, perhaps.
Yeah.
That's kind of.
I think maybe some proper use and maybe a little bit of misuse, as some of your guests have suggested in the past, like Robert Sullivan.
Yep.
Who said some are reinventing the symbols or repurposing them. Rather.
Agreed.
Speaking of which, I believe your former guest, Mr. Robert W. Sullivan, I believe in the last week or two, just prior to today, he was a guest on Sean Stone's program on your new station there.
That's right. That's right.
On the Lip TV, I believe it was, right?
Yeah, I saw a bit of that, and
okay,
I'm a big fan of Rob. So it's like at some point,
I think he's fantastic. Honestly,
I do too, man. I am.
A great guy, a scholar, and a true gentleman, and he knows his work. He knows it thoroughly. That he can talk about it off the top of his head.
His scholarship is outstanding.
He knows it in and out. He believes in his work.
Yes.
So I find great credit in that.
Yeah, I'm proud to have his books in my library. I mean, when you look at the first one. My God,
the Royal Arch.
Yeah. I mean, that is a massive piece of literature.
Hey,
do you have a hard copy of that?
I don't. I have the Kindle.
Yeah,
copy of that, and that's some text. But I mean, the amount of work he must have put into assembling that. I mean, just even if he had it all already written down, just putting it all in a proper order in which he did must have just taken some time. So. He knows his stuff thoroughly in order to envision which way to deliver it.
That is true.
Yeah, he's a great guy, man.
We'll have to ask his opinion on this sometime, because I know he's also a football fan. So the next time we talk to him, we'll have to get his take on this, because we've touched on it a little bit, but I know that he will set us straight because he follows pop culture. And something like the Super Bowl, I know that he would have watched it. And I know that he's aware that people make these types of statements. So the next time you or I have him on one of our shows, We'll have to ask him because I really want to get his thoughts.
You know, the last time I had him on my show, I had mentioned to him, I said, whether it's my program or on the Electric Pyramid, I said I always seem to catch you on a full moon or an eclipse, or the equinox, or something like that. And this was the middle of December. I said, so this is the one time it's not on one of these exceptional days. And he said, no, today it's a very exceptional day. And I was thinking, like, is it? Like, what am I missing? And he said it's George Washington's birthday today, and he was serious. He said, this is the father's birthday. I was like, and he's right. I said, oh my God, it is December 14th. But to Masons, that's a big day.
Why? You know what? To me, I mean, I've not even thought about that, but that's one thing I do like about the Masons. The Masons have great respect for our founding fathers, and of course, many of our founding fathers were Masons, and I respect that a great deal. So, I mean, George Washington, he's a big deal.
Right. Like, if you were a Mason, it's quite customary to go to your lodge that night and have a meeting, a dinner for Washington's birthday. That's a big one. That. That's a big one. Washington's birthday is a big one for the Masons.
Well, speaking of the winter season and Christmas and things of that nature, by the way, the full moon was 2 nights ago. Mm. So we're
beautiful.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. I know that you and I, briefly before the show started, you mentioned something that, interestingly enough, has been on my mind as well. And you told me that you were reading something by Dionysius. Dionysius. So tell me about this person.
Sure. Dionysius, he's a well-known figure in history. He's written many works. He's known as one of the church fathers. He's also a saint. He's known as Dionysius the Areopagite, meaning Dionysius the Areopagite. It was a little region to the west of Athens. The Parthenon. It was still in the city of Athens, though. Mm-hmm. He's known from that region. He also goes. He's also known historically under the title of Pseudo Dionysius. First of all, he's not the only Dionysius from antiquity. Mm-hmm. So, to be specific, he is known as Dionysius the Areopagite, and he's a church father. Very well credited as being a scholar, and he wrote a great portion of the New Testament is taken from his works. Obviously not the Peter, Paul, Luke, Matthew stories. However, many parts of them are affiliated or borrowed to some degree from Dionysius the Areopagite, but which is all fine. Even with the church, it's all completely fine, because so much was based off of this. Even Saint Jerome's his interpretation of the Bible, when he took the Bible from the old Greek translations and put it into Latin, known as the Vulgate. So all current Bibles, no matter what year you go back to, 1500, 1300, they all derive from St. Jerome's Vulgate. So if I were to study the Bible and I want to find out where things were changed, if in fact they had been changed, I wouldn't be looking King James, I wouldn't be looking anything before or after. You have to go back to St. Jerome. Mm-hmm. St. Jerome changed a whole lot, and I don't argue it. He did, and he changed it in some pretty rude ways where it kind of inconvenienced every religion at that time. He was borrowing from he was borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, if I'm allowed to say that in this situation, right? But ultimately that's what he did. For instance, just real quick with St. Jerome in the Vulgate, there used to be 17 stories attributed to Joshua. There's still 20, 25 stories associated with him, but there used to be more. And these 17 stories that were Joshua's story before St. Jerome, they're no longer in there, but now they are in there. But now those are stories that belong to Jesus. So in this situation, it really pissed off the Hebrews, because now, and not only did they just take it and you say no big deal, but it's, hey, we took it, but you know what? The Hebrews, forget about it. Forget it never was in your book, okay? You know, that's how it went. New story, folks. So they were changing things, not just thinking they were trying to benefit someone. They were changing it to, honestly, to control the masses, just everyone. They wanted everyone to be on a proper understanding, everyone listening to the same thing, everyone working for the same cause, donating money to the same cause.
Certainly.
I mean, it no different than today, honestly. I mean, it's hey, if religion is for profit, I don't know what to say. I mean, this is an old argument. To be quite fair, the original Christian teaching people, and I'm saying people because I'm talking after the apostles, the original true foundation of Christianity was based on the whole premise of do not mix money with religion. That was moral number one. It was moral number one. You can't have one or the other. One belongs to man. If you have anything to them, if you work for money, you are a slave to that person paying you to do that. Mm-hmm. You needed to have your own, to them at the founding time, you needed to have your own commune. Everyone did their part, per se. It was based on values, goodness, the universal law. But all of this got changed. It got changed several times. We also had Josephus before St. Jerome, who changed a lot of things. Some people say he's responsible for it, or St. Jerome. And, there's a little bit of everyone responsible. But there's bigger problems, in my opinion. Though to me, those are obvious changes, whether people want to believe them or not. It's real simple. You just go into history and you look, okay, what did St. Jerome have before and what did he have after? It's really easy. And you say, holy crap, yeah, he changed those things. Argument solved. No reason to argue about it anymore. You don't have to believe it if you don't want to, but it's still a fact. And this happened a few times, Parker. But you know what really pissed me off? And I'm going to tell you, man. I came across some studies a little while back, and I was looking at stories of well-known scholars that I valued everything else they've written, okay, with reason, and they provide reasons for their words. They don't just make comments and say, this is how I feel. In the olden days, when someone made a statement, a claim that might have sounded a little far-fetched, as we spoke earlier, you better be able to back that up. Mm-hmm. You better provide me some reason here. Please give me some examples, and they would. Now, I came across a period here where I was having some difficulties with dates, and I'm not talking about switching from the Gregorian Julian calendar switch. I'm talking about I see some dates missing in our history. As our known history in the Western world, what we know of. We're in the year 2015, right? Mm-hmm. I'm saying if I were to use that calendar, okay? I'm using that calendar for this argument. No other calendar. I'm suggesting there's a possibility that number had been switched too. So what I mean by that is if Jesus lived, which I say if because there's only a couple books that mention him, one being the Bible and one being from Dionysius that we'll get to shortly. I lost myself there, Michael.
Well, okay, Joe.
No. I didn't want to do. I was looking at the time before the break. Now these guys were were writing things when they had to. Now, when the years looked different to me, Michael, in the sense that we're in the year 2015, so Jesus, the figure, would have been basically 2015 years ago, but really the way the Bible goes, he would have been born in like the year 3 BC, if the Bible, if we went by the Bible, because in our calendar there's no year 0. It would have went from 1 BC to 1 AD. Like it's like the Y2K of the Jesus era. There's no way for like a year 0 in our calendar. So there's no way if someone say Jesus was born the year 0, it's physically impossible. We don't have that year in our calendar. So I'm not talking about a few weeks like our calendar switched or a year like that. I'm talking about 530 years missing, which I'll have to explain after the break.
Indeed. My name is Michael Parker. This is the Electric Pyramid. Hang around. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. Welcome back, Truth Seekers. My name is Michael Parker. This is the Electric Pyramid, coming to you as always from Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and I want to thank you for staying up late with us. Before the break, Joe and I were getting into a discussion. It seems like sometimes Joe and I think about the same things at the same time, and he was doing some reading today, and I was also looking into some things about a week ago. My particular question was the idea is, does Jesus truly exist? And I'm not saying that to Joe. Hold on just a second.
Yes, sir.
I'm not saying that to stir up a religious debate. Listen, I'm a Christian, and
right, I was raised Roman Catholic,
and interestingly enough, some people may think I'm nuts when I say this, but the idea of God, and if Jesus is the personification of God, we are talking about something that is a matter of faith. And so to me, on one side, I'm curious about, did the man exist? And I'm not the only person, there are books out there. There's plenty of people who've made this same question. Did a historical Jesus exist? And that was the thing that I was looking into. And one of the things that I've been frustrated with is I can find no concurrent accounts of people who lived with him at that time. Everything that we hear about is through people who came afterwards, or the retelling of stories. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I was not under the impression that there are any accounts from a person who lived in the time of Jesus in existence.
Here's what we have. With this gentleman, Dionysius the Areopagite, he was a best friend of St. Peter. He knew all of the apostles. He wrote on them extensively. His work still exists today. He's written many, many books. Many of the church fathers have taken great chunks of his work and installed them into the New Testament. St. Thomas Aquinas, for instance. St. Thomas Aquinas, when he, in his Summa Theologica, which became a great part of the New Testament, St. Thomas Aquinas, he quoted Dionysius the Areopagite's work 1,700 times into the New Testament. So this is just how well revered he was. It was known to, and still is to, a great deal of people under the Roman Catholic Church to be titled the Second Bible, because of he is the only known witness in history, in human history, to write on the crucifixion of Jesus as a first-hand account. That he was an eyewitness. But there's a major problem. Dionysius, he was he was a great writer, no doubt. But he must have also had the ability to tell the future in a profound way, because he didn't just borrow from texts that were not yet to be printed, but he has plagiarized and stolen paragraphs and pages from works that weren't even printed yet. So either he knew in advance or his works were at a later date. And the problem I have, and a lot of others do, believe it or not, is, for instance, we have Plotinus, a Greek scholar in the year 270, who wrote a great deal of works. He was the founder of Neoplatonism. He was the last of the great philosophers going back all the way before Socrates and Parmenides, all the way back to Moses and Abraham, all the way down to our guy Plotinus. And he's in the year 270. He wrote a great book on life that Dionysius borrowed from extensively. He ripped that book apart. He stole half of that book. Then we have another Greek scholar, Proclus. Proclus was in the year 470. Again, butchered that book and ripped it apart. So now how is Dionysius witnessing the crucifixion of Jesus, but also plagiarizing Proclus in the year 470? It has been pretty much proven. I mean, the only people who will argue it are people that still depend on faith. But what it boils down to is Dionysius is now known as Pseudo-Dionysius, which in Latin means he's known as Dionysius the Fake. Although the church still holds this work incredibly high, this work is nothing short of an absolute forgery from top to bottom. It was done by design, and it borrowed from many, many other works, not just these other two. But Michael, here's the kicker, and I've touched on this a little bit before, and a lot of people don't understand is we know of the Greek scholars, we know of Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and the rest. We know of them, we know their contributions, and this is why we learn of them. But there's a whole other story. There used to be another story. So if you were to ask me, did Jesus live? Never mind, was he crucified? Was this figure named Jesus live? Well, it depends. I would say it's possible, but he probably wouldn't have been known as Jesus, because let's say we have Dionysius here. The problem with Dionysius is what happened was, what he made an attempt to do was he was following up on work done by Eusebius before him and St. Augustine, another church founder. And I'll just take it in from St. Augustine. I'll quote him, where he wrote in his book titled On the True Religion, if a few things were changed, the Platonists would become Christians. And this started off the changing of the books to say, okay, we have all of these Greek people in the Eastern Roman Empire, and the Roman Church is in the Western Roman Empire. They wanted to crush the Eastern Roman Empire. Now, have you heard of the donation of Constantine? Constantine the Great? Constantine, who founded Constantinople.
Yes, but
it's said that Constantine, on his deathbed, converted to Christianity, and he signed this donation, which went to the Church of Rome, saying all of the Eastern Roman Empire, all the lands, all its property, all of its people, everything goes to the Holy Roman Church. Now, this document was the soul of all four Crusades. All four Crusades were in the name of this document, where the Roman Empire went to Constantinople, to the Eastern Roman Empire, saying, hey, all of your land is ours, and made many attempts to conquer that land, and eventually did with the aid of the Turks. Well, the people really don't understand that. The church was asking for help to take them down because they had this document. They had proof. And the thing is, the document known as this document here, the donation of Constantine, is an absolute forgery as well. And the kicker is the church now admits that as well, that is a forgery.
Okay, yeah, we have discussed that before. So
yeah,
so
these all come from the same route. See, what happened, Michael, was Dionysius the Areopagite. If you were to start a list and start at the very, very top and put Moses at the top, to when Dionysius wrote his book, this is what he would have looked at. Okay, he would have had a lot of Middle Eastern people at this time, because in the year 529, Emperor Justinian in Constantine, he banned all public speaking, all public philosophy, all the ancient philosophical schools. He ordered them all closed. Everything had to be closed, and all the old Greek works were no longer allowed to be spread, no longer allowed to be discussed. And that was in the year 529. Now, the first appearance of this Dionysius book, these books of Dionysius that were supposed to be from the year 30, 35, the first appearance of this book, wouldn't you know, is just 1 year after all schools of philosophy were ordered closed. And it turns up right in Syria, where a lot of these Middle Eastern names were popular. And they were all kicked out of Constantinople, and more or less this book was produced a year after all philosophy was banned. This book was assembled and became the new work in the Roman Empire. And we know of it. Also, the first mention of an emperor is just a few years after this. So there's never a mention of him anywhere before these dates. There's no documents that ever existed. This story was completely fabricated by, in regards to him being a first-hand witness, is completely false. And there's very few people who will do the research that will deny that. He changed a lot, where in the sense that on his scale, when he sat down at his books, at the top of his list, he took Pythagoras and made Pythagoras Moses. And he went right on down the list. He didn't go one for one, but more or less we had Socrates, and he had a group of 12 followers. If you want to call them disciples, you can. You want to call them apostles, you can. More or less that story was borrowed from there. But he went back and forth, and he was borrowing them one from the other. And Paul from Plotinus, and he was going back and forth. And a lot of scholars have tried to match up specific people with specific dates, but he really didn't do a clean swap. He didn't say, okay, I will make Paul this guy. It was in some cases with a little bit of each one. But here's what happened. Before this story appeared, approximately for the first time, which seems to be around the year 530 AD, there's no mention of Jesus ever being crucified before that date. You won't find a document of it. And I've been saying for many years, you won't even find any art of Jesus on a cross before the 14th century. You're just not going to find it. It's just that story, that wasn't a story. That's late 1400s is when you start finding. I'd say I feel quite comfortable around 1460 I'll start seeing Jesus on a cross. Before that, good luck. You're not going to find one. There's over 10,000 images of the Eastern Roman Empire where Christianity was their main religion for almost 1,000 years, or over 1,000 years. But there's no Jesus on a cross in any of them. There's over 10,000 Jesus images, none on a cross. That's strictly a Vatican story, strictly. And there was a lot of people arguing that, big time. So much so, this guy Lorenzo Valla in the 1400s, he was there right before the fall of the Eastern Roman Empire, when all of the scholars and the Magi came to Florence to try to come into a resolution and say, hey, the church is trying to squash us. They said they keep bringing these 3 documents to us, one called this Bible, one a donation of Constantine, and the other these works of Dionysius the Areopagite as the witness to all of this. So this was the legal case, if you will, that the church was making. They have a donation, they have the Bible, and they have Dionysius the witness.
That's their paper trail.
That's their paper trail. And the scholars of the time, one being Lorenzo Valla, who is an absolute genius. I should mention Lorenzo Valla's best student was Marsilio Ficino. Mm-hmm. These guys, and Da Vinci included, or the Medici, all these guys, they all knew it, plain as day. They said all three of these documents the church is using, all three of them are completely false, word for word. And they were going through all of them and just saying, you could find, let's see, in St. Augustine, a huge church founder, he even writes in his book, The Confessions, that he has found all of the works of John the Evangelist in the works of Platonists, from Plato's followers. I mean, these were the stories. There were stories like when Jesus says, you have a better chance of getting, what does he say, an elephant into heaven than you do a rich person.
Right.
I get it confused sometimes, but that story was Plato's story too, but it was a giraffe. They just changed little things and they borrowed and begged, but I'm sticking to it. Before the year 500, you're not going to find anything about Jesus being on a cross. I mean, the cross was really, just as it was the astronomical wheel, Michael. As you started with you put a dot on a piece of paper, and that's the center. That's the universe. That's everything.
Well, everything you're describing it's making me think again of this whole solar deity complex.
Hey, that's exactly what it is. That's it. More or less. I mean, to them, they had many gods, but to them, their multi-gods were not human figures. I mean, they were personified into human figures, but they were planets. Their god of Mars was literally the planet, and they would tell you the influences Mars would have on you and when, and what materials and elements to gather to prepare alchemically on certain dates to counteract or to enhance certain, maybe Mercury retrograde. Mm-hmm. Maybe you're a little out of balance. You need a little of this, you need a little of that. And we say, well, they don't know what they were doing. Well, I mean, history tells us people back then only lived 30 to 40 years. Well, for 600 to 800 years of these Greek scholars, from Homer right down to Proclus, very, very few of them, like 5 of them, lived less than 70 years. They all lived between 70 and 100 years. So, I mean, they wrote books on everything, on all matters of life. I mean, here's another one. Here's another guy that they borrowed from big. And most likely this is really where they got Adam from in the Bible. There was another guy, Greek scholar, Democritus. Fantastic dude. He wrote about Adam being the first, the prima morta, the first matter.
The Adamu.
Correct. And he did use, in what he described was that basically a macro and microcosm as well. And he was born, somewhere around 460 BC, somewhere around there. But he was giving, he more or less was explaining the microcosm, that there's things smaller that we can't see. And it's down to the minuscule, the tiniest, like the dot on a piece of paper, the center. And he said there's a dot in everything. There's the tiniest. And he described it as probably a little tiny minuscule thing that's a representation of creation that cannot be divided, the smallest bit of material. And he described it very much like a molecule, like an atom. And you know what? He called it an atom. And he described it just as we discovered it 100 years ago. And he described these things just as we do today. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And some people might say, well, where did he come across this? If you were to read his work, you might find that it was not alien intervention. he goes through 10 volumes of this work, giving nothing but reasons and examples on how he came up with it. But he had simple ones for, like, one of his simple explanations for it to prove it, where that matter was minuscule beyond sight, were reasons. He would say, like, if you had an apple with the finest, sharpest, thinnest blade you could find, you were to slice down the side and cut a sliver off of it. And if you were to take that sliver and try to reattach it to the apple, you would find that it doesn't really fit the way it did. You'll still be able to see a little bit missing of that apple, you know?
Yes.
And he said, where did it go? It's not missing. You didn't lose it. It didn't disappear. And he's saying that you're just slicing in between little tiny cells, down to the tiniest particles of atoms. And what he said was, more importantly, not just his finding of the atoms, but that there was these tiny things called atoms just as much as there's a tiny space of nothing next to it.
And who was this gentleman that said this again?
Democritus. And he was explaining that the area where there would be nothing was just as important as the atom, because the nothing draws the atom, which would be like negative and positive. And we know today it's the negative that's the force, not the positive. It's the negative.
And he deduced this just through his own
through reason.
This is pretty brilliant.
Well, I mean, that was the whole premise of the Greek methodology of philosophy was reasoning. You know, to rule it down, you get it down. Well, it must be this or this, and then you have to break those down and look at them. But you know, he had wonderful examples, Michael, like where he said, you know, the nothingness next to the atom is what draws the atom to move. You know, the atom is stationary. The atom needs nothing in order to move. It has nowhere to go. The atom is forced where it is by other atoms until nothing is beside it, and it could move. And he goes on to say, like a standing fish in water on a running stream. You see a stream running rapidly, and you see a fish just standing there chilling, just stationary, because it creates a little pocket in front of it, an eddy, where the water's forced around it. But really, and it's true what we know in physics today, it really creates like a low pressure eddy in front of the fish, and it's kind of drawing the fish forward, although it's just in the right proportions that it ends up the fish can actually stay stationary. That's why it's not washed away in a moving river. It could just stay stationary if it chose to. And he says the same with birds in flight, with its wings, the way it forces the air to cause a lower pressure air in front, drawing it forward.
Okay,
you know,
well, let me ask.
Pulling out wind and all these things, and you say, well, this is really amazing that they were coming across this, and but all of these weren't just his thoughts. You know, a lot of these things, you know, he thought of. He's probably more or less. Maybe he did come up with the atom theory. Yeah, I mean, even in science today, he is known as the founder of the atom, believe it or not. But a lot of these things you have to know. Again, at his point, he's now entering a school of masters that have been teaching from teacher to student for 1,000 years just in his place. And it's known, the founders of that were, you know, Pythagoras and Homer, that they're well known for going to Egypt and studying there for 20, 30 years apiece, and saying, you know, their mathematicians and astronomers were top notch, and I didn't leave until I knew what they had to say. You know, so it took 10 years, 20 years, whatever it was. We're not leaving until we're done, and that's it. Well, but back then they were seeking to learn. They wanted to. They felt knowledge and learning was the key to everything, and they looked at things with reasoning and examples. They felt God was present in everything, so it could be explained in everything. We just need to get it all in order to explain it, the world is chaotic, and nature was the world was created for us in chaos. Everything we need is here, but it's kind of all over the place. And these guys were more of God. To them, God, to be here and do God's work was to assemble all the puzzle pieces that were left all over the world and to create in these math proportions or acquire these elements and these materials for certain foods at certain times. And they felt everything had a purpose, but it was to find out what to be used at what time to better oneself in health and in mind. You had to take care of the body. You need the body to live a long time because they knew it took a lifetime to get wisdom. You get old too fast and wise too late, right?
Well, let's circle back around then. With everything you're telling me, so my question gets back to then who actually wrote the Gospels and who were they writing it about?
The Gospels were pretty much just taken from all pagan works, and by that I mean the Greek philosophers. Those were the pagans.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get
They were. They're very, very similar. They're very similar, and we've also talked about this in the late 1400s. Now, when Lorenzo Valla and friends were arguing these things, it was still they had to be very careful. They were all under fire by the Inquisition right now, and hard. They were watching their friends being killed off, family
this is
members.
Heretical.
And, so they knew this information. They knew it well. And they kept their mouths shut. This was a horrible time. And it wasn't until 1504 when Erasmus from the Netherlands, he took all this information Lorenzo Valla had and put it in print, and he printed it. And let me tell you something, for about a year, that year 1504, I'm telling you, man, people should look into it. That was a wild year. It was like the church went on full on fury on just conquer and just make everyone believe this Bible or kill them right now. And they did everywhere they could, including the New World. They just, here's this new Gutenberg printed Bible, believe this or die.
Yep.
And that's what it was. And obviously the church in the any land under the Holy Roman rule, Erasmus's book now was obviously top of the list on the banned books. You're not allowed to have that book, and they were ordered to burn every single one of them in the world. And they probably had hundreds of people on that. They really wanted that work gone. And coincidentally, my guy Giordano Bruno, that the church burnt alive, when he said he knew the real meanings of Christianity and the real teachings, and he said that he was going to return faith. And mind you, Giordano Bruno, not only is he from a Greek line of philosophers in study, but this is a man who was also a priest in the Roman Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
And he was caught with that book. He had a copy of that book 60 years after it was originally banned. He got caught with it. And they imprisoned him. And after 9 years, they said, we're going to take you into the church square here right out in front for celebration of Ash Wednesday for the year 1600, for celebration of the church's jubilee. They were going to burn Giordano Bruno outside alive. I know after this video from ISIS, I know this is tough to say that the church would do this, but they did it in celebration. They took the brightest guy of the time with his buddy Galileo watching, and they burnt him alive, and they kept everyone out. Like Galileo, he didn't print another book for 25 years after that day. But Giordano Bruno got caught with that very book, and he said, when you take me out to that square to burn me, I'm going to yell out the truth as loud as I can. And they said, no, you're not, because we're going to nail your tongue to this pole right here. And they did. But more or less, this book I'm talking about, of Pseudo Dionysius, this book about how the whole hierarchical lineage of the Greek philosophy schools was transferred into all of the prophets down through the church fathers of St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Jerome. These people all played a part, but all borrowed from the same source. And what really hurt the church was, in this time of Lorenzo Valla and friends in the late 1400s making these claims, this was immediately after the fall of Constantinople, when all of the scholars were influxing into Florence under the Medici. The Medici kept them safe, like Ficino and others. Mm-hmm. But not only did the people come, but they actually brought the books, the original books, from Constantine's library, some from the Library of Alexandria, with original stories, bringing stories that would have been before this Jesus story anyhow. Bringing stories that would have been 200 BC or 300 BC and saying these are Jesus stories now. And they still are. They were still being turned. And when this all got shut down, right there in the year, we could just basically say 1500, this is when we get modern day Christianity. This is when we get the term, it is good to be a God-fearing man. Mm-hmm. This is when it became good to fear God. Before that, it was taught to learn and love God. That was your purpose.
Right.
To return the love, to recognize it, appreciate it, temper yourself, use temperament. You have to get a little control of yourself. You have a world soul, a de anima, as Aristotle would have said, a universal soul, whatever it may be, whatever you want to call it. It's different from your body. Your body is that of a beast, and through wisdom and temperament and learning to return divine thoughts back from its origin of source to them would have enabled you to become a man, be a man and rise up out of a beast. And this was the image of the centaur, half man, half beast. It was a man rising from a beast. We're just a beast. You're just a man without proper reason to them. I'm just a man following man desires, which ultimately really bring no pleasure. They're just temporary. You as a temporary desire, as a man desire to them, it's you really want this really bad for yourself. You work hard for it, whatever it is. You strive for it. You get it. That second you get it, that desire, that appreciation, happiness, whatever that emotion you're feeling at that moment, when you say, you know what, I'm really happy right now, they understood that moment you also recognized that was your happiest moment, but now you just hit your moment of decline. You're at that moment, your happiness is declining at that moment, whether rapid or not. And it everything rises and falls. And so long as you search to them, as long as you look for earthly desires, they're just going to be temporary. You're just putting a temporary Band-Aid on everything until you learn to think about divine things properly, which would bring Jove and love, and which they say would bring more wisdom. You would have more understanding, and to them, that's to Socrates. No, that's why he said he knew nothing. None of his thoughts originated with him. To him they all came from the sun, and he had memories, but he said those are just memories. But his ideas and thoughts, they come from elsewhere, and he said that's what he seeks. Everything else here is just temporary. It's temporary happiness, as they would have said. But
Joe, I think my head's going to explode.
Sorry.
No, it's a lot of information.
I know, man, it's a lot of stuff, but a lot has been changed, and unfortunately, it has to deal with the church also installed very, very careful safety mechanisms and trap doors. Like
I was about to use the same. I was about to use the word safeguards.
Before the year 1500, you're not going to find an Antichrist story. So this is when they installed, be careful of the guy coming to tell you the truth. Yeah. That's the one that's going to bring everything down. Like they say, like, oh man, they put a trap door in here because now they say, oh my God, you're the Antichrist. Oh, it's like Well, I'm not really. That's what they would have said. We're not really. I mean, guys, there was a Christ story. Unfortunately, they put it with this guy Jesus. But there was a Christ. There was a Christ story. It was the Christos. It was just a human figure, just as I was mentioning before, that they had a human figure for Mars, for Mercury, for Venus, for the moon, for the sun. They had one for everything. And reason being, they understood completely that through symbolization and images, you learn faster. You learn the words help you understand. And, Michael, they use analogies like if you look at a painting of a forest, and you look at it for just 1 second, and you look at it, and someone asks you questions on it, you can say, hey, what kind of trees did you see? I saw an elm tree, a hickory, saw a pine, saw this animal, saw that animal. And then you could say, okay, well, what is that tree good for? What is this animal good? And you could find out, so this person could tell you so much from it. And you say, well, all you did was look for a second. But if you look at a piece of paper, a page of a book for 1 second, what are you going to tell me? 3 words? You're not even going to be able to tell me what they meant. You're going to put a sentence together. But this is also the same reason that they said the Egyptians had perfected their language into symbols, because they could look at it and understand everything on a sheet of paper as if they were looking at a forest. They didn't need to look at the pine and say, okay, what's a pine do? They know everything about that pine tree already when they see it. They didn't need to read an entire sentence and have it interpreted, because through symbols and understandings of their properties, they saw everything as an image, is how they would have been explaining it.
Which again takes us even further back. How did the Egyptians know what they knew?
I agree.
It just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And
yeah.
And you and I have discussed many times how. Listen, I'm not here to knock the ancient alien thing. I enjoy it.
I'm not making claims either. I'm merely using other people's words here.
Absolutely, and it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. Wow.
Well, a lot has been taken from us. A lot. I mean, here's another example. I mean, you're tired. Everyone's probably tired of hearing me talking about the world not being flat. Another one, our guy Democritus earlier with the atom, he went on and on about that one, about the world being round. I mean, no one then, as I mentioned, the argument, if there was an argument, and it also happened to be in the late 1400s, wasn't if the world was round or flat. It was how round the world was in measurement.
Which is quite astute.
That was the argument. But in fairness, there was already astrolabes simulating the size of the Earth. In the 1460s. Before this known argument of Christopher Columbus, they were already creating globes for measurement on the circumference. But they were really close. They were in
close. Respect to the flat Earth topic. I mean,
some people still hold on that, bro. You know that?
Of course, absolutely.
Someone just nailed me on that one about a month ago.
Well, that's what I was just about to say. It's like it's one of those things that I knew that what you said was correct, but you forget about it because it is such an omnipresent idea.
We're all taught it. It's not like they used to teach that. I mean,
and it's nonsense.
That's what they teach. It's fact. Christopher Columbus thought the world was flat. My kids learned it this year.
Sure.
Incredible. I mean,
and completely
not the case. Not the case at all. If I say it's the case, I also say that's why Amerigo Vespucci should get credit for finding everything. Because Christopher Columbus, in Christopher Columbus's journals, it says, "I found the New World, and I found it without the aid of a compass, without the aid of a telescope, without the aid of anything." And Vespucci says, "I found it because I'm better than any sailor, because I have the best instruments and I know how to use them better than anyone. I have a telescope, an astrolabe, a map, a compass, a sextant." The guy has every device in the world, and you say, "How is this possible?" He was just like a guy who basically, more or less commandeered a boat. You know, he wasn't sailing for the king and queen of Spain, which I should say was ruling the world at that moment. They were the ones running the Inquisition. So if the most powerful king and queen of Europe gave you absolutely no navigational devices, yeah, you were screwed, man. But anyhow, we know that story's a fake. Christopher Columbus never thought that, whether Christopher Columbus was real. The story was created and published in 1839 by Washington Irving. He printed a story known as The Life of Christopher Columbus, and he wrote an incredible tale about how, you know, they were fearful not to sail west into the Atlantic because they were going to drop off the face of the earth. There was an end to the earth. It had an end. It wasn't continuous as a sphere. And but to be clear, in that day when that book was printed in 1838, that book was intended to be fiction, and it's still regarded fiction. It's a fictional book today. Why do they teach it in schools? I have no idea. It's a fiction book. I don't know. The guy was not a historian. He wrote fiction, and it's a fiction book, and it's still a fictional story. But Michael, it blows my mind that they still teach this ridiculous idea when I can show you endless works for over 1,000 years before Christopher Columbus, not just talking about the measurement of the circumference of the earth, but on so many aspects of it being round and all of the constellations going around our sphere like a ring, and why our water on Earth only could stay here if the world was round and spinning, or else it wouldn't be able to stay on the surface. And they had many reasons. Just simple. If they were going to talk about a boat, they say they knew the world was round because when you see a boat coming from the distance, you see the top of the sail first. You know, and as it gets closer, you see more and more of it because it's coming up over the horizon. And simple measurements of shadows. They knew the Earth was round, and they were able to measure it with just a simple stick and shadows. But they also knew back then, just as well as all the great artists of all time have figured out, the true beauty of light is the shadows. Everything is the shadows. The secret is to light is the shadows. That's its image. You could get all your measurements from it. You could get depth perception from it. Without it, it's just light. The shadows are the variations of the light, and it was used by everyone. I mean, you know, Michael, you need all the lights to study astronomy, but it was absolutely necessary for geometry, the study of the math of the earth, and you know, they had it pretty good, man. I mean, Aristotle wrote a book on the world being round, and he described the world being round, but kind of like how we know it today, where it's like not perfectly round, that our north and south pole kind of squished in a little bit.
Well, that's what I meant earlier when you were speaking about the gentleman talking about how round it was. I mean, that's why I said that was very astute, because not only is it circular or round, but it's not exactly round.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right, and even more specifically, that they described it. They said the world would be, in order to recreate one for display, that it would be a series of pentagons and hexagons. Exactly like a soccer ball is how they described it, and they would have told you it would have taken a series of them to create it, because it's not perfectly round, and but they knew enough to do all of this. And you know what else they also do? Here's something a lot of people don't know. There's maps going back a long time, and what they had was they had, well, we don't have the New World in those maps, but they took half of the globe, the known world, roughly 180 degrees of the globe, and what they would do is they draw the equator right across from east to west, and they knew, now divide that in half, and you got 90 degrees. Now they knew over the 90 and the 180 degrees, Michael, that each day if you were to take that map, each day you move 1 degree for each day.
Mm-hmm.
And each day, let's just say we're on the equator and it's the first day of spring, okay?
Mm-hmm.
They knew on degree number one, the sun is 1 notch above the line. Now, the next day, degree number 2, that sun rose up 1 notch higher. Do you understand?
Yes.
Degree number 3, now, so when they did this,
principles of navigation,
it would look like from over 90 degrees of the globe, it would look like an arch. It would go from, it would rise and it come down, but then it would also show the southern hemisphere. It's tough to do on radio without images, but it would show it as a wave on the equator. The sun's path would go, it would rise up above the equator and below. And they would show how this was endless. And that's how they got to measuring it, where they were trying to, this came from the Book of Hours, where they were trying to measure through the arch of the sun, the sun's path, on how round the globe actually was. And because they figured it was 360 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And with 360 days, that was the Gregorian Julian calendar difference right there, that 5 day. And now we know, because we're a little oblique, where the Earth's a little crushed, we're actually 365 degrees. Mm-hmm. We're 364 point whatever, right? We got leap year in there.
Right.
This is where it all comes from. And all of this had been taken away from us. And there are books that Isaac Newton published that he's given credit for in a lot of his discoveries, where he might be the one to discover and prove it with modern day science, but he was just reinstalling so many works from someone like Democritus from almost 2,000 years before him. But why is that? Because people after the year 1500 in the know, people that were in these tight illuminated circles were resurfacing this information when they were able to prove it. You know what I mean? You can't just say, well, the world is round. The world goes around the sun. Like Copernicus had to come out. He needed to prove that,
Mm-hmm.
So when he said it, he made sure he's already spoken to the top scholars to say, we got your back on this one. But just don't use my name.
Right.
Right. But really, that's what it was. I mean, after 1500, once we get into the age after the Renaissance, this is when science starts to come to fruition. And all of these great ideas were coming out, like Newton's laws. Come on, man. I'm going to be honest with you. Newton's laws, those were the old Greek universal laws. Those were the laws of the universe. To be honest with you, Plato would have said, the universal laws are the laws given to Hermes. That's what he would have said. Plato, there's Platonism, where modern day Christianity is completely stolen from. And I mean, it's easy to find historically, but we have to remember Plato to them was the divine one. Plato, I want to be clear also, Plato had a divine birth, everybody. I don't know if everyone at home knows that.
I did not know that.
Yeah, Plato was a divine birth. Plato's father wanted Plato's mom, but she was like, no, I'm not having any of that. Plato's dad had a dream and said, hey, Ptictione, this Plato's mom, she's going to have a kid. It's your job to go and make sure she has that kid. Keep her safe. Don't let anything happen to that lady. And they ended up, becoming husband and wife. But that's the story of Plato.
But
remember, Ficino had to change all of this. They had to change. So the stories that we're taught today of Socrates and Plato, that is a revised version. There was a whole other story of Plato and Socrates, and we got a lot of it. But the parts that have been stolen into the religious works of today, you will not find in Plato's works, because remember, Marsilio Ficino, who's in that circle, Lorenzo Valla's student, Marsilio Ficino was ordered to change Plato's works, and he did so. He had two versions of Plato.
And he was ordered to do so by whom?
The church.
Wow.
The church, by Pope Sixtus. Now, because Marsilio Ficino was also a priest.
Yeah.
But if anyone at home reads anything that has, if you've ever read anything by Plato or Aristotle for that matter, but most certainly everything that we have of Plato has come through the hands of Marsilio Ficino. There's no text out there in the world that has not been translated to modern day language of Plato's other than Ficino's. So Ficino acquired everything that Plato had, which is really incredible. He wrote a lot. And he spent years just translating it for this group of friends, for the Platonists, and they formed the Academia, Plato's Academy, right there in Florence, for these purposes of this private study. And this is what they came up with, and they had the answers. And Marsilio Ficino, the Inquisition probably would have had him squashed if he had not been the serious philosopher, teacher of the Medici that he was, and he was well protected, but they wanted him dead. And more or less what happened is it all got changed, and there was a mutual agreement that, hey, we still learn of Greek mythology, but the problem is when we hear that, it's Greek mythology now. It's a myth. It's a myth. When unfortunately this school of philosophers ran for 1,800 straight years of succession. And their whole goal was they were proud to spend their entire 80-plus year life studying and learning as much as they can for the sole purpose of saying something as if I could learn as much as I can for 80 years and put it all down into maybe one or two books that someone could learn in a month or a year. That was their goal, saying, I hope my next student doesn't have to relearn everything I had to learn. Mm-hmm. So they would try to break it down to the simplest form of understanding for the better of the next generation.
That's noble. Yes, of course.
But they knew that's how it had to be.
Yes.
Because they would say the same thing. Hey, thank goodness the people before me gave me these great works. Now I'm going to build on that.
Yeah, you're investing in the future by providing them the tools. You assimilated this knowledge. You put it into works that they will then be able to absorb. I get it.
Absolutely. But even to them, it was about images and understanding. And Plato wrote a lot where he would quote gods and attribute so many things to gods, but he was adamant about saying things like, when you're talking to someone and you're going to try to teach them something, whether they want to hear it or not, if you say, you know what you should do, here's what I do, they say instantly you're met with ignorance. Someone doesn't want to hear, all right, tell me what you do, or why is your way the best? Mm-hmm. He said it's always easier to attribute a lesson to a god or a demigod, a higher power, an image of something more powerful.
I get it.
And say, hey, Hermes would have never done that. And you say, you know what, you're right. That he would not have. As opposed to, hey, I'm a good man, I would never do that. They say, well, F off.
But you're just immortal, and
who are you? You know?
Yeah.
But so he was more or less teaching that it's very important to understand the images, the symbolizations. If it was a figurative person, and you say, oh, that person with the caduceus, that's Mercury right there, and I know what his influences are, and you know so many things about Mercury just from seeing that image. Well, to them, the same thing went with Christ, the Christos. I mean, that was the cross of the constellations, and each planet ruled two houses of the astronomical chart, and like the sun with Leo. I mean, that's it's the Sun King. That's the lion. That's tribe of Judah. I mean, it's all relative, and it wasn't. To them, at least, and these are my opinions. To them, it wasn't Mars or Mercury. Were not a person that was here. They were a representation of the spirit of that influence, just as you have influence and spirit, just as there's another side of the moon that you don't see, but it has its influence on you, on people, on animals, on all shellfish and clams only open up on full moons. You know, tides are influenced by the moon, but there's a whole other side of the moon that you don't see, and you know it's there, and you know it influences you just as much as the side you see. And there's infinite examples of this. And unfortunately, what was taken was, in my opinion, if I were to give one, was around the year 1500, reason was replaced with faith. It was no longer, don't ask me how. I would say, wait, don't ask it. You have to have faith, son. You just have faith. You know, like so many questions in even modern day church, they're unanswerable questions. Or often than not, if you want a question, revert back to this verse of a Bible. And I would say, well, I mean, that's been taken from 8 different books now. It's been changed so many times. It has nothing to do with the original teaching.
But also, and you said this earlier, they injected all of this fear into the whole thing, which ultimately makes this a behavioral modification system.
This is when fear was installed. Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, and more to
get people to play ball.
And they know images are everything, Michael. When they tell you got to go there to church every Sunday, and you're there nervous because you don't want to be accused of not being a Christian, because there's witch hunts going on with the Maleficarum book, and not just to mention the Inquisition, but you got to go there in church. Now, you know, before things were a little different, but now in this time period, you go to church with your wife and family. That cross that you used to study for geometry, mathematics, principles, and understandings now has this symbol of Jupiter. Now is the symbol of the planet of Jupiter nailed to the cross, known as Jesus. That was their ruler, you know, the Lord and moderator of all planets, you know, and to them that's what it was. He was a intermediary god. That's the one planet that follows a different ecliptical pattern, and they knew them all. They knew looking up at the sky every night and mapping Venus's pattern above Earth. They knew after 8 years exactly, it would return to the same exact spot they started at, and it would complete the drawing of a flower of life. That's amazing. And to find out that Venus, the influences on the plants and animals that Venus have, are everything within the geometry of flower of life. It's absolutely incredible. And this all came back from, even Plato was the saying, again, Michael, because he was a Hermetic. This comes down to, if above, so below. Yes. And there were planets, or if you want to call them gods, above, causing influence on certain patterns and in certain zodiacal signs.